boredom is my worst fear.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know that you've been dreading touching this subject because boredom, oh my God.
I am scared of boredom, and I've looked back upon my life and I realized that most of my decisions in life are based on the fear of boredom.
Wow.
First, with that said, I want to hear from you on what are your thoughts on boredom?
So I think I can relate to what you've said. Escaping boredom has been quite a big motivator for me for quite a while. And then I started to look at boredom a little bit more in a curious way. I just started to think, well, okay, since we get bored, there must be some reason to it. There must be some, some sense to it. Because otherwise we wouldn't even experience that emotion. So what is it that it's telling us? Like how can we really interpret boredom and how can it be helpful to us and what does it really say? No? So from that place of boredom as a source of fear and I need to get away from it to actually face it and see like, okay, so what is it that you're trying to tell me and what is it that you're trying to tell humans just in general, no? So
Mhm.
why is it that we're bored? And actually it's a rabbit hole. The when I started when I was preparing for our podcast and I started researching it, I just had to let go because you wouldn't imagine how much research there has been done about around boredom, how many books have been written, and how many people actually explore boredom, which interestingly only arrived as a word in a dictionary and has been used as a word only, well, a little bit less than 200 years ago. It was allegedly it was Charles Dickens in one of his novels that he used the word boredom in the mid 19th century. So it's relatively, as a concept, it's relatively new. But I would guess as a state or a feeling or emotion, it's quite old. And I think it's also when we look at the boredom as a with that curious eye, we might and we see the context of it, we might also notice that our culture just expects us to push and move and keep going and move forward and just be on the move all the time. There is a lot of that negative meaning attached to boredom because in our Western culture, we're not expected to be bored. It's better regarded, it's better seen if you are stressed than when you're bored. Like
Mhm.
people would admit, I'm stressed because this means like, oh, you're needed, you're busy, you have things to do, etc. But when you say that you're bored, it means like, oh, maybe you lack imagination or you're not that wanted or, So I was looking at all those aspects of boredom and how that also affects that actually people don't deal with that, because escaping boredom is not dealing with boredom really.
Can you tell
Yeah,
us the definition? When you told us the definition of grounded, I was
right.
blown away. What is the definition of boredom?
The definition of boredom, well, the simplest definition that I found, and funny that you know that I was actually looking at it, but the simplest definition I found was the state of being weary and restless through lack of interest.
Very interesting. Lack of
Mm.
interest.
Lack of interest. So boredom usually shows us that we are, whatever we're doing, we just don't feel engaged and it doesn't interest us, right? And but there is like it can imply that there is some kind of like restlessness, like we there is a I actually found something even better than this definition. So a quote from Leo Tolstoy, the Russian novelist.
I love him.
Tolstoy said boredom is a desire for desires. And
Nice.
actually, I think this is a quite a nice definition of what boredom, like an everyday boredom is, right? So it's
Hmm.
like we want to want something. Like
Hmm.
we feel like we want to be actually interested in something. We want to be feel involved and engaged, and it's just the object of it is not there, right?
Hmm.
So
Okay.
that would be, yeah, that would be the definition. And then when we delve more into psychological side of boredom, I think it starts to become more complicated. But I can talk about it maybe in a moment. I'd like to hear from you first. So
Okay.
how's your experience and research?
Yeah. I spent some time. I don't remember which of us came up with this topic for our podcast, but I took some notes and I said, I feel a tightness in my diaphragm when I think about being bored. Like I have a knot in my diaphragm and I should feel shortness of breath. I feel emptiness, nothingness, loneliness, uselessness, which is a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting thought. Now, I've been trying to focus on when do I have this feeling actually in my real life because it's more the fear of it. And I realize that I have this feeling when I am reading documents that are so dumb and so non-interesting to me. Okay? If I have to look up a manual to fix my, appliance,
Mm-hmm.
and I am just like, this is not helping me. Like, where is the part that's going to help me? Yeah, yesterday I had this exact feeling because I was trying to look up some document on my insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and my eyes become unfocused, and the words are blurring, and I'm just trying to like, how do I get my brain to engage in this material so that I
Mm-hmm.
can find the answer that I need? So, but if I think back on my career in tech for 23 years, over and over as my jobs, like I have a big problem. I come up with a solution. I get people engaged. I get people moving in the right direction. I can see the problem is going to be solved. Maybe it's in a year, maybe it's in 6 months. I'm still solving it. I'm still leading and getting people to get in the right positions and get things
Mm-hmm.
done and explain and make documents to make sure everyone understands the issues and how we're getting there. But as soon as everything's like kind of moving in the right direction, I am immediately realizing that I'm no longer going to be interested. Like in
Mm-hmm.
maybe a few months, I will be bored because everything's just going, everything's moving. And so then I know I will be bored one day and I just can't stand it. Just the thought of like in 6 months, everything's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand it. And so that's when I start looking for my next job.
Mm.
And this has driven me for 23 years. Like it's just a continual habit. If I look back, every jump that I make to a new career or new job is because of this. And I think this is why I left tech, is
Mm-hmm.
because I could see that all the basic problems of tech that I was contributing to have been solved. Like now I'm more interested in going into the health area and exploring and seeing like how can I help get things like how can I identify the problems and come up with some solutions so that I'm not bored. So this has again driven me into a completely different career. Maybe some people will think like, oh, that's quit her tech career. I don't see it like that. I just see me as now moving into my next phase of problem solving, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I'm doing this podcast with you because I think the mental health crisis and the health crisis overall, the biological crisis of our planet is the next problem that I need to solve. And
Mm.
it's really hard. And that's why I love it. I'm so excited about it because I need to have problems. All right. So that's my personal story.
Right.
So what else do you have on this?
Oh, all right. Well, then, from what you've shared, it sounds like boredom shows you your need for stimulus, right? And your need for what works for you is to have big problems to solve, to have the puzzle that you know it's not easy and it cannot be solved by anyone. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Yep.
Which is like, thank you, boredom, for being that messenger, I would say,
Hmm.
right?
It's true.
So
Yeah.
so that you can actually follow your passion, which doesn't depend on the industry. It more depends on the well-being and just like no how
Hmm.
useful you can be. Because you also mentioned that uh, one of the the ingredients of that fear, let's say, is
Hmm.
being useless. Right.
Usefulness, uselessness is a really critical core component.
Mm.
I'm constantly asking, like, am I being useful?
Mm. Right. That's very interesting. Well,
It's
thanks for
very,
that.
yeah. So
Mm.
what about you? What else is on your mind when you start thinking about this word?
Yeah. So I discovered I was actually reflecting the longest periods of boredom that I experienced was when I was at the university and I had to study to certain exams. And I can't remember now whether it was macroeconomics or honestly, I can't remember now. There were a few subjects that I felt so profoundly bored
Hmm.
that I would just escape from that uncomfortable feeling. And now that I look back, I could have chosen like my choices were maybe not very supportive because I would read irrelevant books or I would binge some shows or we can choose different ways how we want to act on that information that boredom brings, right? um, but I know that I just wanted to avoid something. Like I felt like I was out of control. I don't want to do this. I feel like completely disengaged, and this is not for me. And at the same time, I know I have to do this. So the discomfort of it was really, really, really
Hmm.
big. And what I've also noticed is important that we distinguish a boredom of, let's say, everyday boredom that we are talking about and a little bit more of an existential boredom or a boredom that is related to um, maybe that is masking some other feelings which are even more difficult to confront. So
Okay,
it
so
can
you're trying to like
happen.
the existential crisis of like why do humans exist? Why are we here? What is my life about?
Why are we here? Why am I here? What am I doing? Like, lack of control sometimes, which is also related to work that and when the environment is not very supportive towards us and we just feel like we cannot we can't whatever we do we can't um, find agency, right? Then we might also feel bored, but it's like a defensive mechanism
Mhm.
because we don't want to feel that anger and that frustration anymore, or it's just too much. Or sometimes, yeah, it feels like more like apathy. Like this boredom
Mm.
becomes, it can transform into apathy, into depression, even. Yeah, so it's important to, well, I'm speaking from a therapeutic perspective, to be able to distinguish that. Am I just bored momentarily and right now? And can I actually see what it is that I can do, how I can use that information that, oh, I'm bored, what I'm doing is not fulfilling, it's not nourishing. So, how can I act on it and change my circumstances and change my action? Or do I fall into ruminating, or maybe the moves or the decisions that need to take are quite radical, and this is also scary. So I kind of distance myself from that decision, which doesn't help either,
Hmm.
right?
Wow. Okay, so there's so many tangential subjects here. When you were talking about being bored in school, I was thinking about how I believe that I'm close to having ADHD. Okay, I think we may have talked about this before. I had a therapist friend tell me that she doesn't think I have it but I'm close to having it. Because if I'm not interested in a subject, I cannot get myself to study it. But what I've been able to do in almost every subject in school, except for accounting, which I remember clearly, accounting could not fake my brain to think I needed to learn it. Because almost every other subject, I'm like, ooh, calculus. this is going to be really exciting. And I'm able to trick my brain into like, this is something important that I need to know. And then I'm able to enjoy it and get really curious and excited about the material. And I think there's been like two classes in my entire, like I have half a master's degree in from Carnegie Mellon. Only two times in my whole life have I not been able to get to fake my brain, to trick my brain into being excited about a subject. And that second class is the reason. The first one was accounting, and the second one was this automata theory in my that master's degree that I just couldn't. I did the class twice, and I think I started taking it three times. I'm just like, I don't care about this, and I couldn't finish the degree. So I just like stopped doing that degree. Sorry, Carnegie Mellon. I just couldn't do it. I had moved on. My brain had moved on to into bigger problems than automata theory. So I
Mhm.
couldn't. I was like, I will literally never use this subject.
Mhm.
And I couldn't do it. So, but I think that existential crisis, so there's ADHD where, there's real ADHD, and then there's just like, I just can't get into this subject. And
Mhm.
that can cause us a lot of problems, I'm sure. And we could have a whole nother thing on ADHD. But
Mhm.
then there's this like, what is life about? Is it like, are we just
Mhm.
going to get flattened out when the sun dies? And why?
Mhm.
Why bother? So
Mhm.
this is a really interesting problem because it's really like the meaning crisis that I think we're facing as a civilization.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, the meaning and the engagement, these two need to be involved if we want to um, protect ourselves from boredom, let's say. But again, I don't think this is something to be protected from, yeah, because
Hmm.
searching for meaning, uh, it can be very inspiring, it can be motivational, it can lead to discoveries, it can lead to solving problems. So I think
Hmm.
there's also like that balance of how much can I actually do? How do I approach that? Right? That's
Hmm.
situation. How do I find my own agency? How do I perceive
Hmm.
myself in that situation?
Hmm.
I think one more thing, one other aspect of boredom that we haven't touched yet is the actually the healthy boredom, which is like this idleness of the brain or the relaxation of the brain that we can offer to our brain that's been constantly stimulated in a tech era that we live in
Hmm.
right now,
Hmm.
and the way we engage with technology, with even reading, but reading on screen, that it's so difficult. I mean, I'm guilty, the first one guilty, like I open my browser and there are like, I don't know how many tabs open because all those articles and all those links seem so interesting, right? But our attention span shortens and we just overstimulate our brain and we don't give ourselves the space to actually wonder, daydream, and be very to allow the fertility of nothing so that the creative ideas actually come up.
Yeah.
And for me, I know it works. That when I give myself a moment of just like, okay, I'm just gonna do nothing. And when I say do nothing, I usually, I don't know, sit and look at nature or go for a little walk or this doing nothing also usually involves something, but it's not something which is very stimulant,
Hmm.
and some creative ideas come up, or
Yeah.
cleaning or anything that is really sounds like very monotonous and mundane, and washing dishes and sweeping floors, boring tasks can actually open us up to the solutions, the ideas that have been hatching in our mind somewhere in the background, but there was no
Mhm.
space for them to emerge, right? And boredom actually can help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when meditating on this subject, I realized that meditation is planned and strategically used boredom.
Okay, well, okay,
Could
interesting.
be.
Go on.
Well, I think that so this is getting into the subtle mind. In
Mhm,
yogic philosophy, the subtle mind is the like all the things happening in our brain. So we have all of these sensors that are gathering all this data, and it's aware of so many things, but our consciousness can only focus on the basics of keeping us alive. So it doesn't really have time to process all these other inputs. And when we just let our brain settle and we sit and we think about like focusing on the breath or focus on our third eye, then these other things that our brain has been trying to tell us about can arise to the
mhm,
surface, and we can realize, oh, I was supposed to pay that bill. Something so mundane that we're like, oh my gosh, I need to fix my tire. I don't,
mhm,
there's just these basic things that can arise, or we can realize something profound, that the root network of these trees is like me and my community of friends, right? Something
mhm,
more profound can arise. These
mhm,
metaphors may surface that maybe our
mhm,
brain is making all these connections, but we don't have the time to just let it arise because we're too busy with the moment to moment. So I think induced boredom is critical for us to get into our subtle mind. And it's like, what is our brain trying to tell us that we're just not listening to?
mhm, mhm. Right, I can absolutely see that, and I agree. However, I do see a subtle difference between meditation and
Mm.
boredom
Ooh.
in how I understand or bored activities, if that makes sense in that oxymoronic
Hmm.
uh, yeah phrase. So in meditation, what we want to what we want in meditation is that we want to witness our thoughts and not engage with them.
Mm.
So, absolutely, what you're talking about, our brain, our mind will offer us different ideas and different thoughts. And maybe some of them are, like what you said, something that we've suppressed or something that we haven't really seen or haven't been able to see. And it's gonna be, it will emerge in our awareness. Then what we do with this in usually either dissipates or just goes off. No, we usually in meditation the goal is not to engage with the thoughts that are arising.
Right.
While in a when we are bored or daydreaming or just allowing
Hmm.
ourselves to just follow idle,
Hmm.
things and ideas or doodle or clean, we actually allow those thoughts to arise and follow them and engage,
Yes.
so for
Mind
me,
wandering. I think the
this
term is mind.
mind
Yeah.
wandering, exactly. So something that we when we notice mind wandering off, we go back to our breath, like we bring the attention back to the object if we are meditating on an object, right? But with mind wandering exercise, when we just want to indulge ourselves in being bored, it's the opposite. It's actually,
Hmm.
well, we're following the thought and we're just seeing where this thought is going to take us, especially
Hmm.
when we are trying to solve a problem. And I'm
Yeah.
sure both. I'm not saying that any of those are better, and I'm a huge supporter of meditation, and so absolutely. But I also think that, as you said, like consciously induced boredom,
Hmm.
and best if when we are conscious about it, when we actually make it playful somehow, right? Or either we maybe draw or we do something which is in itself also helpful or useful.
Hmm.
Then the creativity can surprise us, our own creativity.
I love it. I love it. This is the point where I wanted to share something with everyone. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I was thinking about what, how do we get into our subtle mind? And this is, I did this little brainstorm on my mind node system. And so I came up with all of these different things of like, how do we get into the subtle mind, right? Meditation, there's a bunch of kind of meditations, mind
Mm-hmm.
mapping, journaling, conversation, study of your childhood, mantras, psychedelics, improv, sculpture, study of
Mm-hmm.
habits, dance, painting, your dreams, nidra, hypnosis, writing. I'm sure there's like 20 more things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I guess mind wandering is not even on here.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing I think we have to do is actually turn off our podcast when we're scrubbing the floor. This is the thing that I think you're coming up with, like turn off the podcast when we go for the walk, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that way we could do the mind watering. Any comments on this though before I turn this off?
Well, I love it, and I can see how this can grow. Absolutely, and I love how you explore that. I just wanted to ask you, is there a specific reason why there's like a left right
No, the
section?
software just does that. The
Okay, okay.
software just does that. Yeah. I'll include a link in the show notes for people who are just listening. But yeah, I think that getting into the mind and understanding the unconscious, and I think this is a really good thing of like just turn off whatever inputs, turn it off, scrub the dishes, and let the mind just go where it's going to go.
Hmm.
So just
Yeah,
an exercise we can all do every day. I mean, we always have to do the dishes, right?
right. I don't have a dishwasher, so I do.
Me, I do, but I don't ever use it. We use it like 3 times.
Well, any final thoughts on this?
I think we've given people practical tools to
Yeah.
use boredom for the bigger picture. So
Absolutely. So treat
yeah,
treat boredom as your ally and just
yeah,
have fun.
it's a tool, just like other things that we've talked about. This is
Yeah,
great, Daga. Thank you so much, and thank you to the audience. And please leave comments in the comments section about other topics you want us to cover. What are your favorite ways to be bored? What have you learned from being bored? And any other things that we've missed in this topic, maybe other definitions. So like, subscribe, share with friends. Anything else we need to ask our audience to do?
I think you've
Right?
covered everything. Thank you for watching and listening.